who's seeing everybody who is entering into our room, and we just want to welcome all of you this morning to our April information session with the Alaska Tribal Resilience Learning Network. And as you enter in, if you want to go ahead and give introductions in the chat box, that'd be great. It'd be wonderful to know where you're calling in from. Admittedly, we have that on the registration, but it would be great for you to introduce yourself. Melinda Chase, Ezra, Gidrin Cheg, Histan, Adet, Godran, Ezrin Listo. I'm Melinda Chase. I'm happy to be here today. I am the tribal liaison at the Alaska Climate Adaptation Science Center. And this session, we're focusing on youth this session and some of the opportunities that are available for youth within the state and one nationally. A title today for our session is Working Together for the Next Generation. This title actually comes from one of our traditional chiefs, Trimble Gilbert, who attended a camp in 2014, which had elders attending and very few youth. And as the week progressed in discussing the future impacts of climate, this was something that he charged the rest of us with, is that we really need to work together for the next generation. So at the bottom of the screen, you will see some of the folks that work together here at the International Arctic Research Center. It houses the Alaska Climate Adaptation Science Center, which I work for, and there's several people that are on our team for the Tribal Resilience Learning Network that are online right now. Krista, Molly, Mike, and Alexis. And then I'm in a partnership for my position with the Aleutian Pribilof Islands Association, and we also partner with the Alaska Center for Climate Assessment Policy. And IARC is at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. And next slide, Krista. The University of Alaska Fairbanks is on the traditional lands of the lower Tanana Dene people in the Tanana Valley. And you'll see this wonderful picture. I took it this morning, just really knowing that every day is Earth Day for us, especially as we are looking at the impacts that our Earth experiences every day. But knowing that tomorrow is a particular day set aside for that in this week. But I just want to remind you that the Alaska Tribal Resilience Network, what's new, we have basically introduced it in the last month and a half. And we want to encourage you to go on the website. For those of you who might be on the phone, our website is akcasc.org/AKTRLN. And we are really building this website out, hopefully making it accessible, especially during COVID times. We found out that one-on-one calls, making that accessible to tribes that are addressing their adaptation issues really seems to be working well. So know that you can go online and sign up for that if that's something that you're interested in. And then we are also having these information calls, which we have wonderful guests, speakers that share some of the things that are happening across programs and projects and tribes. And we also have a learning network call that usually we're aiming to have a week after these information sessions. And that provides a space for more dialogue. We will have a Q&A during this session, but that network call also can pick up on some of the conversation with these topics. And finally, we have a e-bulletin that's online that has quite a bit of information. We do some limited announcements during this session, but you might want to take a look at that e-bulletin because it carries a lot of tribal information and Arctic activities around climate resilience. So, Dogaden, next slide. So before I go on to the next slide, I just want to, I forgot the Zoom logistics, and many of you probably are really good at Zoom right now. But do know that you need to mute yourself, or we ask that you keep yourself on mute, and to unmute yourself when we get to the Q&A. And we will definitely keep an eye if you use other forms of Zoom communication. And for those of you who are, if any of you called in on the 800 call number, you will also need to unmute yourself if you want to ask any questions or make any comments. So here's a couple of announcements that we really wanted to share. As you know, tomorrow is Earth Day, and the Biden-Harris administration is having a climate summit for the next 2 days. That's pretty exciting. It is supposed to be live broadcast. We couldn't find a link for you, but we are putting a link in the chat box. And there you may find where that's televised. That's a link to the White House, and 40 nations are invited to that online event. So that's going to be available to you. Breaking down some of that will be a presentation and a webinar by ITEP, Institute of Tribal Environmental Professionals, that the tribal liaisons, and we are affiliated with ITEP through the BIA Tribal Resilience Program. And so I just encourage you, if you get a chance, the link is also in the chat for that event that is happening tomorrow. And just a reminder for any of you who are working on the any proposals for the BIA Tribal Resilience awards that are out there, that's due on Friday, as you know. And I just want to say that one of the things I want to emphasize in looking at that program funding is it has a category 8 and a category 9 who you might know about. These are youth categories. I think they're going to continue to be available in the future as far as we know. And so as you listen to the guests today, know that, think ahead for other potential proposals in the future if you haven't, if you're not looking at applying for them this year. And finally, I just want to raise, you can read some of the other announcements we have there. We have a network call next week on the 28th with Huna India Association. We'll join that and share about their trails program. And then you might want to look at the UN Planetary Health Planetary Health Film Workshop. Is pretty excited. It's something you can find on the UN website. And so those are a few announcements. We will have our next month's May 19th and May 26th Learning Network, both information session and network call. Moving right along. So today's session, what I'm really excited about, focusing on youth, is that we have some youth to present to us and share some of their experience about what they're learning. But the focus of today's session is really to increase awareness on including youth in tribal adaptation planning, and also in tribal plans, and to provide some examples of both formal and informal learning opportunities that are available to tribal youth and communities, some from IARC, some nationally, and to highlight the role of local leadership, educators or community teams in creating youth opportunities and how significant that is. So that's the focus of today's session. So one other thing I just really want to highlight, and we got a loud message from our youth about where we're at and in experiencing their concern and their response to climate change in 2019. You know, the AFN resolution was passed basically saying that we have a climate crisis going on in Alaska, and youth and elders put that resolution forward. And so really, how do we respond to our youth and provide them opportunities on multiple fronts? And of course, they are challenging us to take action in many areas. So next slide. So really what another major point that I stressed in the beginning or in the objectives there is, as tribes are working on tribal adaptation planning, oftentimes they may be looking at issues around food security or vulnerability of certain species, or looking at infrastructure needs or health needs, you know, as some of the issues that we faced this last year. But one of the things that tribes can increasingly do is look at how are we going to build capacity, how are we going to build a workforce, what are the areas that our youth could be gaining additional skills in to be responding to the impacts that we're facing, and that can be wrapped in adaptation planning. So next slide. So one of the plans that has mentioned, and there's others, but I have not seen a whole lot across the state. They may be increasing, but I just pulled this as an example. So in the Shaktulix plan, which was in 2014, they had an area under their action, their community action, to consider establishing a class project to train and involve students in local monitoring. They didn't identify what that was, but they did recognize the need to train a younger generation, and they stuck it in their adaptation plan. All right, so at this point, I really want to welcome our guests, and that's who we're here to hear from today. But as you go through and you listen to them, think about, you know, who on the local front can really impact youth and bring youth along, and what's the role of leadership, and then what other programs and opportunities are available, and you will hear of some of those today. So I will turn it over to our very, very special guest as Krista loads up this next presentation. We're happy today to have Roben Itchoak, who is an educator and teacher in Shishmaref, and she's worked with a core group of her students who are our guests. So Roben, I'll let you do introductions from here.
Good morning. Thank you for having us. I am going to introduce myself and just give you a little information about what's happened in Shishmaref. I am Roben Itchoak. I am Iñupiaq. I am Quirkmute from, my grandpa's from Mary's Igloo, and I grew up in Siqnasuaq in Nome. I have a lifelong desire to help redevelop healthy and vibrant Indigenous communities. The current way that I'm doing that is teaching middle school at Shishmaref. And I agree that youth really need to be listened to and proactively respond. That's a lesson that I was taught by my elders. So when I started teaching in Shishmaref, I listened to the kids. And more than listening, they really need to be heard. And so in my classes, I heard that the kids were concerned about their daily life and how they live with erosion, how they live with a concern for fresh water, their concern for the marine mammals around us, and of course, erosion. So when I heard them say that they had these concerns, they also had ideas and what they wanted to do. One of the students wanted to work for NASA, and because I had talked with and worked with Christi, Buffington, and I'm sorry, Katie, with Christi and Katie, I knew that they could help me. I didn't know what we needed, but I reached out to them and they were able to set me up with the program that they were aware of so that the kids could take their concerns and their interest and move on. So that's how we got involved in this Dirty Snow project. If you'll go to the next slide, please. So we had special collaborators. Like I said, I was in the classroom, the kids had their own ideas, and I just listened to them. And I reached out to somebody that I thought would be able to help them. And this is the team that actually put it all together to help these kids be as successful as they wanted to be. So there's the Dirty Snow Science. And then through collaboration and help with the science teacher, the kids were able to participate in Zoom classes. And now I'll let the kids take over.
This one.
Sit in your chair.
Our team members are Trevor Ningwak, Norman Stenek, and Emma Lana. We are seventh graders at Shishmaref School, a member of the Bering Strait School District. Our community is changing. Learning about climate change can help our village. Next, please.
Itchoak, Shishmaref, Alaska is located on Shishmaref Island in the Chukchi Sea, just north of the Bering Strait and 5 miles from our mainland. Shishmaref lies within the Bering Land Bridge National Preserve. About 600 people live here. Next slide, please.
The snow provides us water for Shishmaref. It feeds the plants and berries for cooking. We use the water for surviving life. We need it for the plants. We have a water source because we don't have running water and freshwater sources like a lake or a river. We were taught how to do this project by Christi Buffington and Carl Schmidt. They taught us how to brainstorm, research questions, and collect and filter our snow samples. We sent the filters to Carl and he analyzed them and told us the amount of chemical contamination each filter had.
Next slide, please.
We wondered how dirty the snow is, which site is the dirtiest, why is it dirty, and which site is the cleanest.
We used the Globe Cloud Observer from NASA to tell what clouds we had while collecting the samples. We used white and gray tiles in the pictures to see what color the snow was. To collect the snow samples, we measured snow depth 3 places at each site, then collected snow from a 30 centimeter by 30 centimeter square. We took 0 to 3 centimeters in depth for the surface sample, and for the subsurface, we took 3 to 10 centimeters in depth. We tested 5 sites, north, east, and west of runway, and east and west of our water source.
Next, please.
The results show that the west runway was the dirtiest, 32.6 micrograms per liter on filter, while the water source was the cleanest, 0.0959 micrograms per liter on filter. The results support our hypothesis that the dirtiest and most disturbed site was the runway, and the least disturbed and cleanest was the water source. Next slide, please.
This study was important and it was fun collecting the samples. Our snow is dirty and it is important to keep on studying the snow to see if it'll get dirtier or cleaner. This research should continue and check if the snow depth regularly because the snow might blow away and take the dirtiness with it. Students and teachers should care about climate change and be involved in science because it could help them.
And we have our last slide. So these are the sources, the people and the documents that helped us to do this research. Thank you.
That was great. Thank you. Wonderful. Wonderful work, students. It's great to hear the stories and really to be able to see what you're curious about, and then also recognize that you're learning how to collect that information. I'll turn it over to you, Katie.
Can I ask a question to the students? What do you think was your favorite part or the most important part of this project?
All of it.
All of it, really? Yeah. Like going out, the going outside part's pretty nice, I'd say. Getting out of the classroom. Do you have any questions now after you saw your filters and your results?
No.
No. Okay. I do think it's really important work, and I'm glad to see that the water is clean at the water source. That's really important to know. Great job. Thank you. Did anybody else have a question for the students before? Because this is the real important work, the work that the students have done. Kathleen Meckel, do you have any questions for the kids?
I don't have questions, but I want to commend the students for being involved and for looking at your environment and being the scientists, you know, because your work is extremely important. Boots on the ground in your rural communities, contributing to this type of research. That is very important work you're doing. And thank you for doing it. I applaud you.
Yes, me too. Boots on the ground, Kathleen. Yes, this is exactly what we put on our first slide here. So my name is Katie Spellman. I grew up here in Fairbanks, Alaska. And my mother is Chris Villano and my father is Jim Villano, and they were teachers here in Alaska. They taught in rural Alaska, they taught in urban Alaska. And growing up, I thought that teaching was the most important job you could ever do, because I watched my parents for so many years, but I secretly wanted to be a scientist. And as I grew up, I kept thinking, man, teaching is the most important thing you can ever do in your life. So then I became a scientist, but I decided to make sure that teaching and youth were a part of everything that I do in science. And so I work with a really great team at the International Arctic Research Center, and you'll hear from Christi Buffington, but we also work with Dr. Elena Sparrow, who's our fearless leader, and we work closely with the Association of Interior Native Educators, which Melinda happens to be the executive director of, and there are Association of Interior Educator people in the audience here today. So we, the most of what we do, and Christi, you could go to the next slide, is we try to, this is our lobby area, and this is a group of Girl Scouts that came to learn about a changing climate and what they can do to make a difference about our changing climate in Alaska. And we promote learning, teaching, and training to advance our understanding of the Arctic and our role in it. And then how can we raise our kids up in our state to prepare for a changing climate? Next slide, Krista. And we offer learning and engagement programs at every level of learning, from K-12 to undergrad to graduate, and then up beyond adults, elders. Like it's a reciprocal learning across all ages. But for youth, we really hone in on environmental monitoring projects and GLOBE Alaska. GLOBE is Global Learning and Observations to Benefit the Environment. And if you noticed, Roben put on her first slide that she is a GLOBE certified teacher. This is a program that is largely supported by NASA, and it was started 26 years ago to engage youth in observing their environment. And most of our programs revolve around GLOBE in some way or another. We've wrapped that into our Arctic and Earth Science project, which we'll talk more in depth about. And it is about solving climate change problems, just like Shishmaref school students did, solving real world problems using our understanding of our own place, our own culture, and science to address issues in a changing climate here in Alaska and beyond. We also have a new program called Inspiring Girls Expeditions. It's a program that IARC just recently brought in that gets girls outside exploring the world through adventures. So they go on these wild adventures and empower girls to think of themselves as scientists and as adventurers. And then we run a camp every summer called Fostering Science, among other things we do. At the undergraduate level, we are the host of the UAF Climate Scholars Program, which is a new program at UAF designed to train UAF students in climate change understanding from lots of different perspectives, and give them opportunities to practice problem solving in climate change. We run all sorts of research intensives and experiences for undergrads, including experiences through our Arctic and Earth Science program. And then at the graduate level, there are research assistantships if you become a graduate student. And one example of that is our Arctic and Alaska observing, oh my gosh, Christi, what is that? AOK, Knowledge Hub. It's an environmental observing program in coastal Arctic Alaska that focuses a lot on sea ice and marine mammal work. And then we offer a summer school, and this brings in graduate students from all over the world to learn about the Arctic right here in Alaska. Next slide. So at the heart of most of these programs, there's your dad, there's Ken. Most of these programs is using various ways of knowing and learning about the environment to help our communities address climate issues. So across all these programs, that is a theme of what we do. Next slide. And so I'm going to give you a few of the programs that you could get involved in. And Melinda mentioned that, you know, youth are being asked, well, number one, you like in the slide that Melinda showed, youth are demanding a voice in climate change in our state. And it's turning up in our climate adaptation plan. So how do we facilitate that? Because it's easy to say and harder to do. And so we've been trying to create pathways for youth to actively engage in climate adaptation planning through environmental monitoring. So going out and collecting data on your snow, like you guys did in Shishmaref, or on permafrost. And so in our Arctic and Earth Science program, we bring teams together of educators and long-term community members, and in some cases, youth leaders. If there's a youth leader that's really interested, they come together and we bring everybody and learn a lot about climate change from each other. We listen to elders and we learn ways that we can monitor the environment and use that to stimulate action. And there, pretty much any topic that you see here, we offer options to study them. So if your community is interested in drought, through Globe, we help you design a project where you can investigate drought and use it to take action. If you're interested in berries, then you can design a project, and we support you and help you and through the use of the Globe program. AINE, which Melinda is the executive director of, they also are developing curricula that support the learning on a variety of topic areas. And they've started with birch, a unit on birch. So next slide. So some of our projects hone in on specific topic areas. If berries, oh, thanks Molly for popping that in the chat. There's the link to Globe. And if you're interested in berries, we run a program called Winterberry, which is a community science program that looks at the condition of berries and whether the changing timing of our seasons will affect the quality of our berries. And we just got some new funding to really dig into that and how that could fit into our climate adaptation planning efforts. And also a new question has come out of like, why are berries rotting and what's causing them to rot? And we're gonna be piloting a new project called Microberry, which is exploring the microbes that are on the surface of the berries that might be a key player in our future condition of our berries. So next slide, Krista. If you're interested in ice and snow, one of our programs is called Fresh Eyes on Ice. And in this program, school groups mostly and after school clubs or families, actually, there's a big homeschool family cohort across the state that's participating, is they go out and they measure the ice thickness, because ice is not as safe as it used to be. It's more unpredictable. The times when it used to be safe are less reliable than they were in the past. And this project gets youth out observing the ice from the shore when it's not safe and on the ice when it is safe to be on the ice. And we just got funding from NASA to expand this project out a little bit. And then the project that the Shishmaref students were detailing is a pilot project that Christi's been working on that offers a chance to look at how clean the snow is. Next. Krista, can't you read my mind? Come on. All right, and then for that program, Girls on Ice, they're addressing each of their expeditions addresses a different topic. And so if a youth is interested in the way that glaciers are changing, they can sign up for Girls on Ice. If they're interested in coastal habitats, marine mammals, and our ocean environment, then they can go to Girls on the Water. And if they're interested in the forest environment and how it's changing, then they can do Girls in the Forest. Next. So in each of these programs, we have a learning model that we like to follow that it draws on decades of work that has been going on in Alaska on culturally responsive science education. And so we've tried to draw from that model to root climate change learning in our place and our culture, but also allow kids to practice the skills of data collection and data analysis from a more Western science perspective. So these are students from Iñupiaq, and they did a project on erosion, and this is them presenting their scientific investigation on erosion in their village through a dance that their teacher, Pauline Morris, who you can see in the corner, helped them create. And they were presenting this in Ireland at the Globe International meeting. So the first step that we take in this process, we follow a learning cycle model that starts with listening. A lot of scientists like to start with talking, as you guys might know, but this process, we are trying to flip that and train all of us to start with listening. And so first step, listen to elders. You can see here's Marie Dayton from Itchoak, who is talking to some of the youth in one of our meetings, and another student who's from Fairbanks, listening to the trends of change and trying to record what people think in our own place are most important changes that we need to better understand. Next. Then we try to offer supports to learn more about the topic that comes out as really important. This is an example of a hot off the press lesson plan developed through by AINE educators, Maxine Dybert and friends, who have written lessons that fit the seasonal cycle of life in Alaska and help the kids learn and explore more about a certain topic area that might be important and that is changing. Next. And then these are just some more examples of how educators across Alaska are using a place-based model to integrate language and seasonal cycle and math and science skills into this learning process. This is a bulletin board from Santa Roach in Siqnasuaq, where they the students were practicing all of their local words for berry. They were doing a project on berries, and she wanted to make sure that they were practicing their own language while they were learning about these topics, and then went on to study and monitor berries for their community. Next. And the making sure that it's rooted in our local values and traditional values, and making sure that it connects to the actual concerns within your community, not just joining up on another project. Dirty snow could be, you know, something really big, but Roben, I love how you said, all right, what is interesting to you, and let the kids drive the process. So this is a recent teacher workshop that we ran, looking at how youth can be involved in climate change learning, rooted in the Athabascan values. One of the supports that we provide for this process also is connections to other youth working on climate change issues in their community, and to scientists around the world, from NASA, from UAF, from the Forest Service. And so providing meet the scientist sessions and opportunities for youth to interact with each other. This example up above is one of our workshops where two youth, one from Alaska and one from Hawaii, were both concerned about food security in their communities. And one of them went off and studied breadfruit. That's Sage up with the microphone and sitting down. She went and studied berries in her backyard, and they both were doing the same topic, and so could really talk with each other about it. Next slide. And then really drilling in on some of the skills that you might need to collect data and to be able to understand your own data in your community and offer it to your community to support adaptation planning. This is, again, the Iñupiaq students. Dr. Sparrow went out to Iñupiaq and trained them and worked with them to figure out a plan. And just like in the example from Shishmaref, and then they had their own solid data to look at whether soil moisture was influencing erosion in their community or not. And then the final step, we start with listening, and then we end with sharing our stories. And so, and taking action, using the data to actually help navigate a path forward for your community. So this is students from Metlakatla Indian community. Shout out, Alexis, to your hometown. And these students were interested in a salmon stream that had died, and they wanted to see if they could uncover some of the reasons. And so they looked at the water chemistry of their salmon streams, and they found really big differences in one that still had salmon in it and one that did not. And so they went on to present their work in professional settings through the GLOBE program, and really did work with their tribal council to share their data. And Melinda called me last night, and she was like, all right, you can show the glitz and glamour part of all your programs, but you got to be real, Katie. And so none of this is perfect. It's hard. It's like, especially when it's grownups trying to design programs for kids, and you think you know what's going to get people excited, and you think you can sustain it because you're excited. But sustaining an effort is challenging, really, in any context, whether you're working with grownups or youth. You need a champion. The places where this model has worked for more than 3 years, there's a single educator or a single IGAP environmental coordinator who is championing it, and they're keeping it going. So we've learned a lot about that, as it's hard to sustain. And this is due to turnover issues in our state that are big issues, both with educator turnover, that, you know, educators leave within 2 years, then you have to train them again on how to do the monitoring. Same is true for our local environmental staff. Like there's turnover within our tribes and within our schools that makes those partnerships harder. And we're really trying to brainstorm around how to make that more fluid. How can we, which key members in the community outside of those offices or schools are important for being a champion for monitoring things for a long time. And then we also realize that there's a lot of work in this area that's ongoing, and how can we leverage those efforts and make sure that the networks are strong, the learning networks, just like this learning network. How can we make sure that we're all learning from each other and not duplicating effort? And then we had great ideas of opening these opportunities up to youth outside of Alaska, and we had started bringing in teams from other places, other tribal communities in the lower 48, and it's been amazing because the communities we're all exchanging information from the lower 48 and from Alaska, and people in the lower 48 are realizing that we have a lot going on up here in Alaska. And however, it's taking up spots for other Alaskan teams to participate, and like, we know we need this kind of work here in Alaska. So how much do we stretch the resources to facilitate that sharing? So Melinda, I hope that was the, the reality. Do you want to add anything, Melinda, about things that we've learned?
I think you wrapped it up really well. I think the one thing that is significant when you bring in tribes from stateside and you have a conversation is that people understand the role of the Arctic climate system and you know, the population in the lower 48, the choices they are making are impacting our livelihood. And then of course our Arctic system impacts their reality with their climate impacts. And so, you know, helping to convey that understanding is significant. And the exchange that happens, I think, is pretty eye-opening for many people. So soak it in. Thank you.
And I think Christy's going to tell you how you can get involved, right, Christy?
Yeah, it's just the next slide. You don't have to exit that. So while she's getting that back up, my name is Christi Buffington. I am the daughter of Richard Hannum and Terry Hannum. And my mother was a teacher before I was born, but she's still a teacher, teaching me and my 4 siblings. I grew up in Colorado, and she has inspired me to really care about the local environment and the people in the environment, and then also to use the knowledge that I've gotten and to do something with it. So I actually get to see her this weekend for her 85th birthday. Enough about me. Really, this is the Shishmaref 7th graders that are here today, that are the stars of the show. So Norman and Trevor, and their teacher, Roben, is the champion that Katie mentioned. I just want to show you a little bit what it looks like on the educator side for this kind of commitment that teachers and community members make who want to work with youth and partner with our programs at the University of Alaska Fairbanks that can support them. So you can see there's two whiteboard or flip charts. Which side is the dirtiest? Which side is the cleanest? Those are the questions that the students came up with themselves. And in the green font, the green writing are the hypothesis and the explanations. And that was done through a question formulation inquiry process that we did. And the students watched this video virtually of this process with Roben, and that's all Roben's writing. So I think it's just really important that you know what the champion is doing behind the scenes, and you can see the kids are up climbing these huge snow drifts, figuring out what's a good sample spot, what's not. They're the experts in their community. The scientists at UAF are not the experts in that local place. It's the people who live there who are. Next slide. And I also just want to share that last part of this learning cycle model that Katie presented is doing something with the data that they produced, sharing it in their own community, making plans to continue monitoring that will help with their climate adaptation planning, and then also contributing to science. Norman, Trevor, you are scientists, and your poster is shared on the Globe International Virtual Science Symposium. And you have shared this with the world. There are 123 countries who are part of Globe. And I'm just so proud of you. And this poster that you made is just amazing. And it's also just the start for what you will continue to do as your interests grow and your educators and family and community continue to support you. Next slide. So I just want to close with welcoming you to partner or contact us or have ideas with us at IARC Education and Outreach. Our director, you can contact her, Dr. Elena Sparrow. You can contact Katie Spellman, or you can contact me. And I give you our email addresses, and I'll also put them in the chat. We are going, if you're in the Fairbanks area, we are going to be open this summer for 2 youth camps focused on learning from Birch. And those are in partnership with the with AINE. And I just welcome our collaboration and working together for our future and for climate adaptation, capacity building with youth. So I'll stop there later if there's time for questions. We have some extra slides if needed. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you, Christy, and thank you, Katie, as well as Roben and our youth. They were great addition there to kick us off. And now we're going to look at a national program that is coming up on a deadline really soon, but we're happy to welcome Jennifer Hill here today, who's going to talk with us and share about the Native Youth Community Adaptation and Leadership Congress. So Jennifer?
Hi, thank you, Melinda. I'm going to talk with you today about the Native Youth Community Adaptation and Leadership Congress and describe how we work to raise up emerging Native youth leaders. Next slide, please. So my name is Jennifer Hill. I lead the Native Youth Community Adaptation and Leadership Congress, or NYCALC as we call it, which is held annually in Shepherdstown, West Virginia at the National Conservation Training Center, which is situated on the homeland of the Massachusetts Nation. A little about myself. I spent my younger years with my mother and father, Gary and Rosemary Hill, growing up in North Carolina in the area of the Tuscarora and Lumbee. And I've worked for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service since 2003, mostly within visitor services prior to leading the NYCALC program. Next slide, please. So how does NYCALC uplift the youth? We begin our process by asking the students a big question. And as an example for 2019, our question was, as future leaders, how can you use your voice and skills to make a difference for the environment while continuing to respect your culture and strengthen your sovereignty? So that's an example from 2019, but each year we ask a different big question in a very large open group environment. And we have the students share their answers with one another, which can be really intimidating at first, but we do this to try to get the conversation going. And once one student shares, they tend to start to open up and more of them come out and start to share. The big question is designed to be open-ended and thought-provoking, and it's used to guide their actions throughout the week at NYCALC. It also provides a gateway for the students to interact with one another and learn about each other's perspectives of their environment and their culture. Next slide, please. Thank you. And when I say I'm referring to a large core team of individuals. NYCALC is the only federal program of its kind. It has multiple federal and not-for-profit partners. And you can see the list of partners here on the right hand of this slide. I won't read all of them out to you, but you can see that there's many partners. And the important thing to note is that these are all agencies and organizations that are seeking to uplift Native youth leaders, and they are trying to invest in our younger Native generations. And many of them for the federal partnerships are working to upkeep and fulfill their federal trust responsibilities, which is a unique role and relationship that federal agencies have with tribes. Next slide, please. So I'm gonna kind of go over the framework of the program just to give you an idea of how it functions. It's a week-long student environmental conference, and to date, we've hosted over 450 Native American, Alaska Natives, Native Hawaiian, and American Samoan high school students. And these students are interested in environmental issues, natural resource conservation, community leadership, and networking. And we've had over 70 tribal communities represented in our program. Next slide, please. So typically we accept up to 100 high school students and up to 30 college age students. So we have 2 tracks that are happening simultaneously. And I say typically because for this year, 2021, we're operating a little bit differently, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. But during the week-long Congress, the high school students are running a parallel track with the college students, or what we call junior faculty. And for the high school students, we focus a lot on climate resiliency within their communities and on developing their leadership skills. While for the junior faculty, we're focusing more on job readiness and career building. We also utilize the junior faculty to serve as mentors to the high school students during the week. So students come in community groups of 3 to 5 students from one community with an adult mentor. NICALC is a mentor-based program. High school students must attend with their community mentor, which can range, it can be an elder, a teacher, or an active community member. And then the high school students are introduced to their junior faculty mentor. So they have a more of a peer level mentor. And this helps them build a strong foundation to work with during the week of NICALC and to grow from. We like to do it this way because it's a shared experience that the students have with one another, and it helps them create a bond during their journey. So in planning for the week, we ask questions like, how can the students lead up and down within their communities, or how can they develop their leadership abilities? And what does leadership look like for youth? We try to think from a youth's perspective. We get a lot of input and feedback, especially from our junior faculty on planning for NICALC. We've learned that exposure to multiple tribal backgrounds increases their awareness and understanding of one another, and that they realize that they share similar issues in tribal communities. And so here, this slide just shows you some of the outcomes that we hope students will experience while they're at NICALC. And they're centered around common values, which our examples are contributing to community, climate resiliency, and empowering youth. Next slide. So I mentioned at the very beginning of the presentation, the big question, which we start out with, and that big question starts this process of open space technology, or OST. And OST ensures that the outcomes of the week are student driven. They are not adult or facilitator driven. The students determine what is meaningful to them and how their voice will be heard. So in planning the Congress, we do develop an agenda, but that agenda includes numerous spaces of chunks of time for OST, and that's how the students decide how their time will be spent. So it's really important to us that they get to choose the path that they're working on through the week, which ultimately affects their community project when they go back home. It affects how they interact with one another and their relationships that they form with one another. And so the OST, the open space technology, is just one of the tools that we're trying to use to uplift the youth to be able to hear their voice and not our voice or not a facilitator's voice, and to help them find their passion. So here are some of the examples of past themes that students have generated in response to their big question. So they go through this process where they're asked the big question, they try to answer the big question. With their initial responses, they start to form themes. And the themes are where they decide they're going to spend the rest of their time at NICALC. So for example, one student from a community may choose to spend their time focusing on tribal government, while another student from that same community may choose to spend their time focusing on the importance of language. And it's important to note that not all of the topics that the students cover are related directly to climate resiliency, which is what our program hinges around. But we realize without covering all of these topics, we're doing a disservice to the students and their culture. So we really try to incorporate all the topics that come up and have the students focus on what they feel is most important. And then this slide is just more examples of the students working in their groups. They form what we call mini circles. And as I mentioned previously, they have a generous amount of time built into the schedule to work within their mini circles. There are junior faculty with the students that help to provide resources if the students have questions, if they need some materials, the junior faculty are there. And then sometimes we have what we call faculty or adults sitting in the background. The adults are allowed to sit there, but they're not allowed to speak necessarily. They can help answer questions if they're approached, or they can help provide resources if there's certain things that are needed. But we really want to make sure that the voices heard are the students and not that of the junior faculty or the adult faculty helping. So we really try not to steer or guide their conversation. So in addition to that, all that OST or open space technology that they go through, the students also participate in a variety of workshops. There's a career fair, and then there are a series of service learning projects. And workshops, they range widely, but they are all STEM related or STEM based. So a workshop, an example, is that one may discuss fire severity affecting tribal communities. Another may discuss water quality and monitoring, while a third may discuss the traditional harvesting methods of native foods. And then for the service learning projects, they're designed to focus on giving back to the community and working within local communities. It's designed to help them think about what they could do at their home, at their tribe. And they also earn service learning hours, which can go towards graduating in some instances. So from the variety of these activities that the students participate in, we've asked for feedback from them after each NICALC, and repeatedly what we've learned is that after participating in these activities, they are alongside all of the federal partners that I listed earlier. They are much more willing and much more likely to seek out and learn about federal agencies and to seek out and learn about our partnering organizations now that they've spent time working with them. They've gone through a career fair, they've worked shoulder to shoulder on a service learning project. And that's one of the goals of NICALC, is to help us rebuild the trust between the federal agencies and the tribal communities. We're really trying to model that and show that we can be a support system for these students. So a fun tip is that we take the students on a river trip where they get the choice to kayak or canoe. And it's not just all about fun and games. We do this as a team building and confidence building exercise. It really helps the students to open up. So for this reason, we do this early in the week. It's received the highest rankings from the students. They really enjoy it, but for us, it really helps us see the students come out and who they are. So then we come to the end of Congress, and at this point, the students are required to deliver a presentation to their newly established NICALC family. And the presentations vary from storytelling to skits and videos. And they are presented in their mini circle groups, so they're not alone. They're with their group that they've worked with all week long. And their presentations reflect the ideas that they plan to take back to their home community. Next slide. So a side note, as part of attending NICALC, the students also have access to apply for small seed grants. They range from $1,000 to $2,000. And we really hope that the students will apply for these grants to go back to their community, apply for the grants, and then use that funding to help stimulate or start, or maybe carry on a project that's already working within their community. So this is where the mentor comes into play again. Having that mentor there to help oversee the project, to keep the kids motivated, and to help oversee the funding for the students is really how the mentor comes into play after NICALC has concluded. So then we culminate the week with what we call the cultural gathering. And the cultural gathering is a very special time. It really solidifies the Congress. And we look at it as a time to honor traditions that are shared with one another. The students are no longer with their mini groups, they're back with their community groups. And they take this time to share with us a story or a game, maybe a song or dance. And it's really the true highlight of NICALC, because it's where the students get to show their culture and carry on the traditions and the stories that are important for their cultures. So upon completion of NICALC, we hope the students will be able to do several things, and I won't list them all here, but most importantly, what we want you to know is that the students will be able to actively participate with like-minded people in addressing issues related to climate change, to climate resiliency, to natural resource conservation. And I think most important above all, the students have gained a new sense of self by participating in NICALC. So what about 2021? We all have been through the pandemic and the changes that it has brought to us. And initially we were trying to offer a month-long Congress virtually to participants, but we realized that Zoom fatigue was a real thing. So we decided to shorten it to a 3-day event. Next slide, please. It's going to look very different than the NICALC I just described to you in person, but it will still focus on climate resiliency, and it will still focus on leadership development. So for this year, we're still in the acceptance period for applications. So if you know of a student in high school or a junior faculty or a college age student that could be junior faculty, we are still looking for those students to join us. Each student will be awarded $500 to go to towards their community. And that $500 can go towards a project like starting a recycling program or a native food seed bank, or it can go towards a natural resource-based activity such as a camping trip. We are still asking that students come in groups, but for 2 to 5 students, instead of 3 to 5, we're asking for 2 to 5 students with a mentor. And then the students will also have access to those mini grants I mentioned. So others don't have access to those, but the NICALC students would have access to those. And then probably most excitingly is that by signing up for NICALC this year, they're automatically enrolled to attend NICALC next year in person in Shepherdstown, West Virginia. We do realize that especially in rural areas that internet access or connectivity can be an issue. And so we can't provide physical devices or hotspots to accommodate that need, but we may be able to provide financial assistance to help offset that. And so in the application process, we do ask if internet connectivity is good or bad. And once a student applies and they check that box, we will follow up with them to see how we can help assist them to attend NICALC. So the application period closes on April 30th, and the details, including how to apply, can be found at nicalc.org, which I'll show at the end of the presentation. But for the folks on the phone, that's nycalc.org. So in closing, I just want to say that NICALC is really a student-driven program. We look to them as current leaders. They are, in our eyes, they are leaders. And we work to build up their leadership capabilities. And NICALC is also rooted in climate resiliency and addressing the climate issues in tribal communities. So now I'll open it up to questions for this presentation, I guess, or for others too. I'll leave that up to Melinda.
Great. Thank you, Jennifer.
Yeah,
Well,
thank you.
Yeah, that was great. It's just so exciting to see all those pictures of youth and how excited they look like they're having such a great time connecting with one another and learning. We are, we are 7 minutes past the hour, and I know, boy, judging time frames for multiple presenters is a challenge, and probably me going on too much in the beginning. I know that maybe what we'll go ahead and do is just encourage anybody, if you have specific questions about any of the programs that were presented, or experiences that youth may have in those programs, that you contact any of the folks listed, because I don't want to try to keep people, if there's anything pressing and somebody wants to write it in the chat box, then I just encourage you all to contact folks here. I think that's they're all approachable. We do have a presentation on inspiring girls that happened in January, but what I wanted to do the last couple minutes is actually draw your attention to this last page and turn it over to one of our young people, who are our young intern that is with us, Alexis, and just have her share really quickly about another resource that's online. This page. Go ahead, Alexis.
Hey, yeah, thank you everyone for the presentations and for joining us today. That was really inspiring. I loved seeing the kids present their own work. So on our website for resources, we have tools and reports, which include information from the Building Resilience Today training series, the Tribal Climate Adaptation guidebooks, the SNAP tools, and we also have the recordings uploaded with PowerPoint presentations from our previous informational sessions. And I just wanted to highlight that we do have a PowerPoint presentation with youth opportunities across the nation, Alaska, national, Pacific Northwest. And I would highly encourage you guys to review that. Even if it doesn't apply to your region, I recommend reaching out to them. I mean, it could help build your own programs similar. And then for April 28th, we will be having a network call with Hoona Native Association to continue this conversation of building up the youth and leadership in climate change adaptation planning. And yeah, thank you again, everyone. And we look forward to seeing you on the call.
Yes, please join us, and that may be a place to have further conversation about any of these presentations. So thank you to all of our presenters once again, and for those of you who joined us, and we hope you will be online next week and next month. Okay, then. See you all.